Hello everyone. I'm the storyteller from the channel Whispered Tales and I'm here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from? At what time are you watching? Now, get comfortable and relax. In the far north, where pine trees grow thin and crooked and the mountains hide their teeth behind veils of snow, lay a village too old to appear on most maps, Lorne Hollow. The kind of place where even birds seemed reluctant to settle, where the fog arrived not in tendrils but in waves, as though the forest exhaled secrets each night. There were only two roads into the hollow, both winding, narrow things choked by thorns and frost for much of the year. Travelers rarely found the village by accident. Those who did seldom remembered the way back out. In Lorne Hollow, people lived quietly and spoke in low tones. They did not gossip loudly or celebrate publicly, not because they were cold-hearted, but because they knew things that didn't like noise. It was a place for secrets, and of all the old secrets in that gray little village, none was more whispered about than the clockmaker, Ellior Finch. His shop sat at the end of Black Thistle Lane, past the butcher's and the baker's shuttered windowpanes. The sign above the door bore a worn engraving of an owl clutching a clock face, with the faded name, Time's End. No one remembered when the sign had been new. No one remembered when Ellior had arrived, either. Some said he'd always been there. Others said he came from the mountains, or the woods, or further still. He never said. Children dared each other to run up to the shop and knock on the door, but none lingered. A chill hung around the building like a storm cloud that never moved. At night, when the rest of the hollow lay quiet in their beds, a faint orange glow pulsed behind the thick curtains of the clock shop. Some swore they saw shadows moving behind them, too many and too tall to belong to one man. Then there was the sound. Ticking, dozens, maybe hundreds of clocks. They ticked all through the night, never in unison. The rhythm twisted, tangled, played tricks on the ear. But always, like clockwork, at 12:07 a.m., they stopped. All of them. No chimes. No gongs. No echoes. Just silence. It was that silence that chilled the bones of Lorne Hollow more than any winter wind could. And so the villagers learned not to listen too closely. Not to linger near the shop at night. And most of all, not to ask questions. But then came Marin. Marin arrived in Lorne Hollow wrapped in a red wool coat 2 sizes too big for her, shoulders hunched under its weight as though hiding from something larger than cold. She came by the southern road, on foot, boots caked with dried mud and soles too thin for the frostbitten earth. Her arrival was quiet, unannounced, and precisely the kind that drew the attention of Lorne Hollow's watchers, from behind curtained windows, from beneath low-brimmed hats. She said little at the inn. Paid in coin too old and too fine. Took a room in the attic and kept to herself. Old Mrs. Jellyn, the innkeeper, tried to be friendly. "You're far from anywhere, dear. What brings you up this ghost spine of a road?" Marin offered a ghost of a smile. "Looking for something. Or maybe just trying to be found." Mrs. Jellyn didn't like that answer. Not one bit. Marin wandered the hollow by day, sketching buildings in a small leather-bound book she kept under her arm. Her drawings were precise, too precise, the kind an architect might draft. But her gaze lingered longest on one place, the clock shop. Time's End. She walked past it 3 times that first day. Once with a glance. Then again, slower. The 3rd time, she paused and tilted her head as if listening to something no one else could hear. It was on the 2nd night, after a windless dusk had settled over Lorne Hollow, that Marin did the unthinkable. She stepped through the fog toward Time's End. The wooden sign creaked gently overhead. The brass doorknob was tarnished, but warm. A tiny bell chimed as she pushed the door open. Not a musical chime, no, it sounded like metal teeth grinding gently together. Inside, the air was warm and dry, heavy with the smell of oil, dust, and old wood. Shelves lined the walls, each crammed with clocks of every shape and size, grandfathers with glassy eyes, mantel clocks like hunched beasts, and countless ticking, whispering pocket watches hanging like strange fruit from hooks. Behind the counter stood Elier Finch. He looked up from a timepiece he was polishing, his eyes a glassy gray that reflected the room's orange lamplight. He didn't smile. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. Marin met his gaze. "Neither should most of your clocks." He blinked. Once. Slowly. Then set down the watch and folded his hands. "Why have you come?" She stepped forward, careful not to brush any shelves. "Because I've seen this place. Not here. In dreams. In places I shouldn't remember." Elier said nothing. But something behind his eyes ticked. A recognition. A threat. "And the clocks?" he asked. "They always stop at 12:07, she whispered. "Even the ones I own. Even the ones buried." Elier stood very still. The ticking around them grew louder, not from any single clock, but from all of them. A crescendo of mechanisms, of hearts not quite living. And then, from somewhere in the back room, something moved. Pendulums. The sound was subtle at first, a creak, low and careful, like an old door taking a breath. Then a soft metallic click, not unlike the snap of a pocket watch closing. Marin turned her head toward the back hallway, but Elier raised one hand sharply. "Do not move," he said. His voice no longer soft, it rang with iron certainty. Marin froze. Even the clocks, it seemed, paused to listen. The air grew thicker, as though the shop itself were holding its breath. From the hallway came the sound again, this time louder, a dragging shuffle. A footstep? No. It sounded more like something being pulled along the floor. Elier stepped out from behind the counter with surprising agility for a man who looked worn by time itself. He reached beneath the counter and produced a key, old, blackened with age, ornate enough to belong to some cathedral crypt, and tucked it into the inside of his coat. Marin's voice came as a whisper. "What is it?" "It knows you're here," Elier murmured. "That's not good." "What is it?" she asked again, this time with more edge. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to a heavy oak door at the far end of the shop, one Marin hadn't noticed at first, partly hidden behind a wall of dusty clocks. He laid his hand flat on the wood. Whispered something in a language that didn't sound like anything human. The door clicked open. Elier turned to her. "You wanted to see. Then you must see. But you'll never unsee it." Marin hesitated. The ticking around her slowed, not uniformly, but as though reluctant. As if each clock was resisting something. She followed him. The hallway was narrow, barely wide enough for one person, lined with more clocks, these ones broken. Some were scorched. Others were fused together by rust, their faces warped or shattered, as though they'd experienced some violent end. At the end of the hall was a spiral staircase of iron, descending into darkness. Elier lit a lantern. The flame danced, casting monstrous shadows along the walls. "There is a place below the shop," he said. "A chamber that predates the building. Possibly predates Lorne Hollow itself. I found it, or perhaps it found me." Marin, despite the cold sweat down her back, found her voice again. "Why do the clocks stop at 12:07? He paused on the third step down. "Because that's when it wakes up." They descended in silence. Each step down the iron spiral groaned with age and memory. The lantern Elier carried through shadows that stretched like clawed hands against the stone walls. The air grew colder, damper, and strangely sweet, like a cellar lined with rotting fruit. At the base of the stairs, the path opened into a cavernous room carved from black stone. The walls were smooth but glistened as if coated with moisture or some subtle residue that defied explanation. The only sound was the faintest ticking, impossibly far away, as though dozens of clocks whispered from behind the stone itself. The chamber held no furniture, only an enormous circle inlaid in the floor, composed of gears the size of wagon wheels. Their teeth were worn but still meshed, forming a perfect ring. They did not move, yet. "This is the unwinding room," Elier said, stepping toward the circle's edge. "It is older than anything built by hands." Marin followed, slow and wary. Her breath made clouds in the air. "What does it unwind?" Elier looked at her with a gaze that pierced through centuries. "Time. Memory. People." She felt a lurch in her gut, as though some part of her recognized the place, like she'd stood at the edge of this circle in another life, or perhaps in a dream that wasn't hers. "It doesn't like to be disturbed," he said. "Every night at 12:07, it tries to break through. The clocks stop because they must. They are shields, warding devices. Each one tuned to a fragment of its presence. But they're weakening." "And me?" Marin asked, the words a whisper. "Why do I remember this?" Elier didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat and produced the old key again. He turned it over in his hand, thumb tracing the worn etchings. "Because you were here once," he said finally. "And you left something behind." Marin's knees buckled slightly as a wave of nausea passed through her. A chill rooted in her spine spread outward. She clutched the collar of her coat as if it would somehow shield her from the heaviness of Elier's words. What do you mean I left something?" "I've never," but the sentence felt wrong in her mouth. The lie soured her tongue. Elier did not press. Instead, he knelt beside the gear circle, lantern light reflecting off the greasy brass. He tapped the floor once with the old key. A low groan echoed upward from deep beneath the stones. A panel beside the circle shifted with a hiss, revealing a small compartment. Inside was a locket. Marin gasped. It was hers. But not the one she wore now. No, this locket had a hairline crack across its silver surface, and she remembered breaking it. Remembered screaming. Remembered running. Elier handed it to her gently. "You came down here years ago. Much younger. You wanted to steal time. Or trade it. I warned you then, too." Her fingers trembled as she opened the locket. Inside, a picture of her, maybe 7 years old. And opposite, an empty space. No face. Just void. Her heart thudded in her chest, heavy and arrhythmic. "It took my sister," she whispered. Elier nodded slowly. "Yes. And she is still down here, somewhere in its coils." The chamber suddenly felt tighter, more alive. The black stone walls seemed to pulse with the rhythm of an unseen heartbeat. Marin stood. Her voice no longer trembled. "Then I'm going to take her back." The hours after midnight stretched unnaturally long in Lorne Hollow. The sky above the village no longer shimmered with stars, only a dense, velvet darkness, as though the heavens themselves had been blotted out. Within the old shop of Time's End, the passage of time seemed to ripple strangely. Seconds wavered. Minutes bent. And in the deep, hidden belly of the clockmaker's domain, Marin stirred on a floor of black wood. The air was thick with dust and something harder to name, like the bitter scent of rust and forgotten memories. Shadows curled at the corners of the room like sleeping beasts. A low hum pulsed from the walls. Marin sat up slowly, clutching her ribs. The fall from the spiral stairs had jarred her, but not broken her. Her thoughts were heavy, like they were swimming through syrup. She remembered a name. A girl. The ticking. The scream. And then, "You're not meant to be here." The voice came from the archway behind her. Smooth, cold, precise. Like glass cracking in slow motion. She turned. There he was, Elier Finch. But this was not the man she had seen fleetingly through the window days before, nor the hunched silhouette who wound clocks by candlelight. This Elier stood tall, his spine unnaturally straight, skin taut and pale. His eyes, they weren't the gray of old age, but silver. Reflective. Unblinking. What is this place? Marin asked, backing away instinctively. Why are your clocks, why do they stop? Elier tilted his head, studying her like a scientist might observe an unfamiliar insect. They stop, he said, walking closer, because I let them. Because if they don't, something else starts. He gestured around the room. There were no traditional clocks here, only machines, twisted, wheezing constructs of gear and wire, bone and brass. Some ticked in reverse. Some pulsed, as if breathing. All were connected by a looping artery of cables running through the walls like veins. Time, Elier said softly, is not a river, Marin. It's a machine. And machines break. Marin stepped toward one of the devices. Its outer shell was cracked open, revealing a softly spinning wheel of names, faded handwriting etched onto vellum. Her own name passed by, Marin Owl. What are these? She whispered. Anchors. Pieces of who you were. Who you are. Each of these machines keeps someone from slipping. But they come at a cost. Slipping? Elier's face twitched. Time forgets things, Marin. Not just dates. Not just memories. People. A person slips through one of the cracks long enough and the world simply stops remembering they ever were. They disappear backwards. Like your sister. Marin froze. The name was sharp on her tongue. Lilac. A sudden rush of pain struck her, like her skull had been split open and sewn shut again. She remembered now, her sister, younger by 3 years. Her soft laugh, the way she used to sing to the clocks in their mother's house. She had vanished one night at 12:07. Not run away. Not taken. Erased. Elier nodded slowly. She was my first repair. He turned and walked toward a wall where an enormous timepiece stood. Unlike the rest, this one was not broken or twisted. It was elegant, ivory and obsidian inlaid with tiny mirrored shards. The hands did not point to any hour. Instead, they spun, almost lazily, in opposite directions. She would have been lost forever if I hadn't anchored her. Where is she? Marin asked, her voice shaking. If she's here, why haven't I seen her? She's asleep, Elier said. The machine remembers her, even if the world doesn't. And when the machines remember, the hollow forgets. He stepped aside, revealing a small door behind the massive clock. It had no handle, just a single, faintly glowing keyhole. The door only opens when the hands align. And they align once a year, for 13 seconds. At 12:07 a.m., every November 19th. Marin did not speak. She could barely breathe. Why that time? She managed to whisper. Elier's voice was colder now. Because that's when I died. Silence settled like ash. He walked to the far corner of the room and lifted his shirt. Marin gasped. In place of a heart, gears turned slowly within a cavity in his chest, powered by a dull golden light. I died in this shop 74 years ago. The clock stopped at 12:07 that night and never moved again. But something else woke up. Something ancient. Something that does not care about life or death, only order. It remade me. Kept me here. So long as I wound the clocks, the time devourer slept. Marin's hands were trembling now. So the clocks, they keep it contained? They do, Elier said. But the more the world forgets, the more I remember. And remembering hurts. He leaned against the edge of the obsidian clock. I am so tired. The pendulums in the room began to slow. The air grew heavier, colder. And now, he said quietly, I am no longer enough. The machines behind them groaned. One sparked and hissed. The spinning wheel of names on the earlier device stopped abruptly, stuck on Marin Owl. Something is changing, Elier whispered. Your presence here, you've caused the mechanisms to notice you. You're bleeding into the archive. Marin clutched the key around her neck. It had always been her sister's, she'd found it years ago in an old shoebox after Lilac vanished. She had worn it every day since. Elier stared at it with sudden intensity. Where did you get that? My sister left it behind, she said. Or maybe it found me. I don't know. Elier closed his eyes. That key belongs to the door of holding. You're not just bleeding into the archive, Marin. You're opening it. The machines screamed. Every device in the room whirred to life at once. The clocks upstairs began ticking, louder, faster. Somewhere far above, a chime began ringing that no one had heard in decades. The chime of reversal. And then, something knocked from inside the door behind the obsidian clock. Once. Twice. Then a soft, childish voice, Marin? Are you there? Marin's eyes welled up. She stepped forward. Elier's hand shot out, catching her wrist. You can't open it now, he said, his face pale, frightened. It's too early. The hands haven't aligned. If you unlock that door without the proper time, it won't just be your sister who comes through. The knocking came again, more urgent. Marin, please, I'm so cold. The machines were failing now. Sparks erupted from the base of one anchor engine, and a long, low moan echoed from behind the walls. Elier was shaking. I can't stop it, he said. Not this time. Time's end is unraveling. Marin turned toward the door. The key in her hand felt hot, pulsing with life. Her sister's voice was muffled, weak, but clear. I don't want to forget you. Tears streamed down Marin's face. What happens, she whispered, if I open it anyway? Elier stared at her for a long, terrible moment. Then he said softly, you trade one soul for another. You take her place. You become the anchor. And from behind the door, something laughed, a cold, jagged sound that wasn't her sister at all. The laughter echoed in the chamber, hollow and brittle, like dry leaves breaking beneath boots. It wasn't the voice of a child, but something much older, something that had worn the shape of a child to fool the living. Marin's breath came in ragged bursts, her fingers tightening around the key like a lifeline. Elier stepped back, away from the door, his silver eyes reflecting a deep sadness that stretched beyond decades. You don't understand what you're about to unleash. She swallowed the lump in her throat. Then tell me, Elier. What is behind that door? He hesitated. Time's end is a prison. This door holds the unmaking, the part of the machine that undoes reality. It consumes memories, people, entire moments until they no longer exist. Your sister. Lilac, she was caught in it. It pulled her in slowly, erasing her from the world so no one remembered. But she never fully left. Marin's heart clenched painfully. So she's trapped? Yes. A ghost trapped in the space between seconds, waiting to be freed. But the prison isn't empty. The unmaking is alive, and it wants to expand. If you open the door before the clocks align, it will spread beyond this room, swallowing everything. The distant chime grew louder, filling the chamber with a mournful tone that seemed to twist the air itself. The large clock's hands above spun faster, like a cyclone of broken time, striking closer to midnight. You have to choose, Marin, Elier said. Open the door now, and your sister may escape, but the unmaking will come with her, and everything you love will be at risk. Wait until the hands align, and you'll have a chance to control what comes through. Or leave now and never look back. Tears spilled down Marin's cheeks. The voice behind the door whispered again, a soft, pleading echo. "Please, Marin, don't forget me." Her fingers trembled on the key's cold metal. The air seemed to pulse, the very walls of Time's End groaning in anticipation. Outside, the village of Lorne Hollow lay silent beneath a sky where time itself seemed suspended. Eliar's gaze held hers, a fragile tether in a storm of shadow. Time does not forgive mistakes. And the unmaking never forgets. Marin took a deep breath, bracing herself for the impossible choice ahead. The clock above tolled, and the hands moved in perfect alignment. The moment had come. With a trembling hand, she lifted the key to the lock. Marin's hand wavered above the keyhole. The faint light radiating from the key pulsed steadily, as if in sync with her heartbeat. The massive obsidian clock's hands aligned perfectly, their opposing spins stilling in unison. Eliar stepped back, his breath shallow, the mechanical gears in his chest whirring louder, as if warning of the danger to come. "You must be ready," he said, voice grave. "Once the door opens, there's no turning back." With a final, deep breath, Marin slid the key into the lock. The mechanism resisted, old and stubborn, but then, with a sound like a sigh, the lock turned. A dull metallic groan rumbled through the walls as the door slowly swung open. Beyond it was not darkness, nor light. It was a shifting void. A place where moments and memories floated like fragments in a vast, empty sea. Shapes flickered, faces and places half remembered, sounds half heard. Time itself felt liquid here. From the depths of this liminal space, a small figure emerged. Lilac, pale and translucent, with eyes wide and desperate, reached out toward Marin. "Sis, please," she whispered, voice trembling. "I'm so cold." Marin's tears blurred her vision. "I'm here. I won't forget you." But behind Lilac, the void churned violently. Dark tendrils writhed, a twisting mass of shadow and broken time, the unmaking, alive and hungry, seeking to escape its prison. Eliar raised his arms, voice chanting in a language older than time itself, gears in his chest spinning at a frantic pace. The machines in the room hummed to life, walls vibrating as they struggled to hold back the encroaching darkness. The choice was no longer just Marin's. It was a battle for reality itself. The shadow tendrils writhed closer, hungry and desperate, their twisting forms hungry to consume. The air around the threshold crackled with ancient power, time itself seemed to shudder. Marin stood frozen, watching Lilac's translucent hand reach out toward her. "I'm here, Lilac," she whispered, stepping forward. Her heart ached with a mixture of hope and terror. Behind her, Eliar's voice rose in an incantation, ancient words scraping the silence like claws. His mechanical heart throbbed visibly beneath his thin skin, gears spinning faster and faster. "Hold the line," he commanded, eyes locked on the dark surge. The machines surrounding them roared to life, massive gears began to turn, clock hands swung wildly, and the room pulsed as if alive. Cables writhed like serpents, lighting up with blue sparks. Each device began to resonate in perfect synchronization, a complex melody woven from the language of time. But the unmaking was relentless. Tendrils lashed out, striking the machines, fracturing the gears, splintering the wood. Sparks flew, and a deafening screech echoed through the chamber. One massive gear cracked and shattered, sending shards flying. Marin clutched the key tightly. "Lilac, hold on," she cried. Lilac's eyes, full of longing, locked on hers. "Don't let it take me," she pleaded, voice fading like a whisper on the wind. Eliar stumbled, clutching his chest as the machinery faltered. "The anchor is weakening," he gasped. "If the machine fails, time will unravel." Suddenly, a blinding flash burst from Marin's key. Light streamed outward, pushing back the shadows, illuminating the swirling void. The tendrils recoiled, screeching in fury. Marin raised the key higher, its warmth flooding through her veins like fire. "You're not alone," she shouted toward her sister. I'm here. I remember you. The room trembled. The chimes above rang louder, a clarion call that rippled through the fabric of reality. The shadow tendrils screamed and writhed, pulling back reluctantly as if forced against an invisible wall. Elier caught his breath, voice steady now. You hold the power of the anchor. Only you can bind the unmaking. Marin nodded, determination hardening inside her like steel. She stepped closer to the door, key glowing brighter than ever. Then I will bind it. For Lilac. For us all. With a surge of will, she pressed the key into the door's lock again. The void flickered, rippling like water. The shadow shrieked one last time and then, slowly, began to dissolve. The heavy door swung closed with a resounding clang. The humming machines quieted, the air lightened, and for the first time in decades, the clocks upstairs ticked steadily, marking the flow of time once more. Marin sank to her knees, exhausted but victorious. Elier approached, a faint smile on his pale lips. You did it, he said softly. You became the anchor. Marin looked up, tears streaming. And Lilac? She's free, Elier assured. And you saved us all. But as they stood in the quiet aftermath, the shadows in the corners of the room whispered still, hinting that some darkness never truly dies. The heavy door of obsidian had shut behind her with a final, echoing clang that seemed to reverberate not just through the walls of Time's End but through Marin's very soul. The hum of the machines softened, settling into a gentle, rhythmic pulse, as if the entire workshop exhaled after a long, harrowing breath. Marin sank slowly onto the cold wooden floor, the weight of what had just transpired pressing heavily upon her chest. Her fingers still gripped the key tightly, its warmth now faint but steady, a heartbeat in metal and memory. Elier stood silently nearby, his eyes scanning the workshop's vast array of clocks and contraptions. It's over, he said softly, but his voice carried the brittle edge of uncertainty. For now. Marin looked up, exhaustion and relief mingling in her eyes. Lilac, where is she now? Elier's gaze softened. She's free. The part of her trapped in the unmaking has been released, returned to the flow of time. But such a release is never without cost. A sudden chill filled the room, and Marin's breath hitched. The clocks lining the walls all ticked in unison, but some of them, older, more obscure, ticked backward, their hands moving counter to the natural order. A faint whisper echoed through the air, a sound almost like laughter, or a voice carried on the wind. Marin frowned. Did you hear that? Elier nodded slowly. The unmaking may have retreated, but it left its mark. Time's End is forever changed. There are echoes, fragments of the darkness that once consumed it, lingering in the spaces between moments. Marin rose, determination kindling anew. Then we have to fix it. Seal it better. Make sure no one else is trapped. Elier's expression was grave. There's only so much we can do. Time is not something to be controlled completely, it is a living, breathing thing. We can guide it, protect it, but it will always find cracks to slip through. Together, they moved through the workshop, inspecting the fragile mechanisms, tightening gears, and relacing wires. Each clock they touched seemed to hum in acknowledgement, a fragile peace settling over the room. Yet, as dawn approached, Marin couldn't shake the feeling that beyond the walls of Time's End, in the quiet village of Lorne Hollow, something had shifted, something ancient and watching. And in the silent spaces between ticks, a new chapter was beginning, written in the shadows and the stars. The first pale light of dawn spilled hesitantly over the rooftops of Lorne Hollow, washing the village in a soft glow that seemed at odds with the heavy silence hanging in the air. Marin and Elier emerged from the shadowed sanctuary of Time's End, blinking against the morning sun as if waking from a long, fevered dream. The streets were eerily quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The shutters on the neighboring houses remained closed, and the familiar scent of wood smoke and damp earth was faint, almost absent. Marin's footsteps echoed unnaturally in the empty lane, each step stirring dust motes that floated like fragile ghosts. "Do you feel it?" Marin whispered, her voice breaking the stillness. Elier nodded. His silver eyes, once bright with the strange light of the clockwork heart, now seemed heavy with fatigue. "The balance has shifted. The unmakings retreat left a wound here, a place where time's flow is thin, where shadows gather." They stopped near the village well, its stone rim worn smooth by centuries of hands. Marin leaned over, peering into the dark water. For a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of movement, a pale face reflected in the depths, then gone. "Lilac," she murmured. "Is it her?" Elier's jaw tightened. "Maybe. Or maybe it's something else, something drawn by the ripples we made." As they walked deeper into the village, Marin noticed subtle changes. Doors that had once been sturdy now sagged on their hinges. Gardens overgrown with thorny vines seemed to whisper as the wind stirred the leaves. And from the shadows between the cottages, faint whispers curled through the air, voices just out of reach, speaking in languages long forgotten. "People don't remember," Elier said quietly. "They never saw what happened at time's end. The village is already forgetting, and with forgetting, the unmaking grows stronger." Marin clenched her fists. "Then we have to remind them. We have to bring them back." They reached the town square, where the ancient clock tower loomed above the cobblestones. Its face was cracked, the hands frozen at 12:07, the very moment when time had fractured so many years ago. Elier laid a hand on the tower's weathered stone. "If we can restart the clock, maybe we can heal the fracture. Give the village back its memories." Marin nodded, resolve hardening. "Then let's begin." But as they turned to the tower's entrance, a chill breeze carried a voice, soft, coaxing, and unmistakably familiar. "Marin, come home." She spun around. The street was empty. Yet the voice lingered, a thread of sound pulling her deeper into the shadowed alleys of Lorne Hollow. Elier's hand found hers, steadying her. "Be careful. The echoes are restless." Together, they stepped into the labyrinth of memories and shadows, where the past whispered and the future waited, fragile, uncertain, and alive. The ancient clock tower stood tall and foreboding, its cracked face staring down like a shattered eye into the village below. The air around it thrummed with a strange energy, a pulse that seemed to echo the uneven beating of Marin's own heart. The sun's first light cast long shadows across the cobblestones, stretching the darkness into the corners of Lorne Hollow where memories hid. Elier pushed open the heavy wooden door, the hinges protesting with a groan that echoed through the hollow tower. Inside, the space was cavernous, filled with the scent of dust, rust, and something faintly metallic, like the remnants of forgotten time. Marin stepped inside cautiously. The walls were lined with ancient gears and mechanisms, some still slowly turning, others frozen in mid-motion as if paused by some invisible hand. At the center of the chamber stood the great clockwork heart, a massive, intricate device of brass and crystal, its core dim and silent. "This is the heart of the tower," Elier said quietly. "It controls the flow of time in Lorne Hollow. If it stops, the village becomes a place lost to the ages." Marin reached out, her fingers trembling as they hovered over the delicate crystal core. "Then we have to restart it." Elier nodded. "But it won't be easy. The fracture in time has corrupted the heart. It's bleeding memories, stealing the village's past and future alike." A sudden shiver ran through Marin. The shadows in the tower seemed to move, twisting and coiling like smoke caught in an unseen breeze. A whisper brushed her ear, "Don't trust the heart, it will betray you." She spun, but saw only the empty chamber. Elier's gaze was sharp, alert. "The echoes are growing stronger. They want to stop us." Marin swallowed her fear and stepped forward, carefully aligning the key, still warm in her pocket, with the mechanism's ancient lock. The gears creaked and groaned as she turned the key, and a soft glow spread through the heart's crystal core. Light spilled out in tendrils, winding through the machinery, awakening the clockwork from its long slumber. The hands on the clock tower's face above began to move, slow at first, then with growing confidence, ticking steadily toward a new hour. But with the rising light, shadows twisted and writhed, unseen eyes watching from the darkness, silent whispers urging the heart to falter once more. Marin gritted her teeth. "We have to hold it together. For the village. For Lilac." Elier nodded. "And for all the moments lost to the unmaking." As the clock tower's heart beat once more, the ground trembled faintly beneath their feet, a reminder that time, fragile as glass, could still break if they were not careful. The steady ticking of the clock tower filled the chamber, but beneath its rhythm lurked a subtle discord, like a heartbeat faltering in the dark. Marin felt it in her bones, a restless stirring beneath the surface of time itself. Elier's eyes scanned the shadows, his body tense and alert. The echoes don't just whisper anymore. They are gathering strength. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the tower, snuffing out the soft glow of the heart's crystal core. Darkness spilled back in like ink, thick and suffocating. Marin's breath caught. "What's happening?" Before Elier could answer, the shadows coalesced into shapes, phantoms of forgotten memories, twisted and distorted by the unmaking. Faces appeared and vanished on the walls, their eyes hollow and accusing. One figure stepped forward, a woman, her features blurred but unmistakable. "You opened the door," she whispered, voice like cracking glass. "You brought the darkness here." Marin shook her head, stepping toward the apparition. "I didn't mean to. I only wanted to save her." The phantom's eyes glowed faintly. "Saving one may doom many." Elier drew a small, intricate device from his pocket, a clockwork talisman pulsing with blue light. He stepped beside Marin, holding it aloft. "We can still bind the shadows, but we must act quickly." The phantoms surged forward, their whispers becoming a cacophony of fear and anger. The tower trembled, gears grinding under the strain. Marin gripped the key, now glowing fiercely. "Tell me what to do." Elier's voice was steady despite the chaos. "Place the talisman within the heart, and use the key to lock the fractures. It will seal the wounds, but it will demand a sacrifice." A chill ran through Marin. "What kind of sacrifice?" Elier's gaze held hers, unwavering. "One who can anchor the flow of time, one who can bear the weight of memories lost." Her mind raced, heart pounding. To save the village, to save Lilac, what would she be willing to give? The shadows closed in. The chamber trembled as the shadows pressed closer, swirling like a storm of lost moments and forgotten faces. Marin's fingers tightened around the key, its warmth a stark contrast to the creeping cold that reached from the shadows to chill her very bones. Elier stood firm, holding the clockwork talisman steady. "This is the moment, Marin. The talisman must be placed within the heart of the tower. Only then can the fractures be sealed." She glanced at the glowing crystal core, pulsing faintly in the center of the great mechanism. A deep sense of responsibility settled over her like a heavy cloak. "And the sacrifice?" Elier's eyes softened, but the weight of truth was unyielding. "The anchor must bear all the memories of those lost to the unmaking, their pain, their love, their lives. It is a burden no one else can carry." Marin's breath caught. Memories flooded her mind, her childhood with Lilac, the laughter they shared, the gradual slipping away of her sister into the void. The faces of the village people, fading from existence. The dark tendrils threatening to consume everything. A quiet resolve hardened within her. "I will bear it. For Lilac. For everyone." Elier nodded solemnly. "Then place the talisman." With trembling hands, Marin lifted the clockwork talisman and carefully set it into the heart's core. The crystal blazed with light, and the chamber filled with a brilliant, pure glow. She raised the key, sliding it into the lock that sealed the fractures. A deep hum filled the tower, rising to a crescendo that shook the very foundations. The shadows screamed, a sound both mournful and enraged, as they were drawn back, sealed behind the new barrier. Marin felt a sudden weight settle in her chest, as if an ocean of memories, joy and sorrow, love and loss, were pouring into her soul. The burden was immense, but beneath it all was a fierce hope. Elier placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You are the anchor now. The keeper of time's fragile balance." Marin closed her eyes, embracing the flood of memories, ready to carry them through whatever darkness might come. Outside, the first rays of sunlight pierced the sky, and the village of Lorne Hollow began to stir, its stories, its people, and its future safe once more, at least for now. The light filtered softly through the high windows of the clock tower, washing the chamber in a golden glow that seemed to breathe new life into the ancient gears and mechanisms. Marin sat quietly, the weight of countless memories settling within her like a tapestry woven from threads of joy, grief, and hope. Elier stood beside her, eyes reflecting a rare softness. "You did more than save the village, Marin. You gave it a future." Marin's lips curved into a weary smile. "It feels like I carry everyone's past in my chest." "That is the burden of the anchor," Elier said gently. "But also its power. Because memory is the root of all time, without it, nothing remains." Outside, the village of Lorne Hollow stirred to life. Windows opened, shutters creaked, and familiar voices began to echo through the streets once more. The fractured moments were mending, the stories returning to the people who had almost forgotten them. Marin rose, stepping to the doorway of the tower. The sun was rising fully now, bathing the village in warm light that promised hope and renewal. But even as the day dawned, a faint whisper curled on the breeze, a soft voice carried from the shadows. "Marin," she paused, turning back toward the heart of the clock tower where the talisman pulsed faintly, its light steady and watchful. The journey was far from over. Because in the spaces between moments, in the quiet hum of time's eternal dance, the echoes of the past lingered, waiting, watching, and forever intertwined with the future. And Marin, the anchor, would hold them all.